Okay, this is some of my favorite books, part 2. And today I'm going to talk about this one and this one. So first, let me start with the first one. This Side of Paradise. And sorry, the camera's not. Now I can't switch the camera back over where it's looking at me anymore. Don't mind the sleeping bag. Okay. Okay, so This Side of Paradise. Okay, this was Scott Fitzgerald's first book. This one's one of my favorite books because I just love the writing style. I love how in-depth he gets about, and what I know about F. Scott Fitzgerald is he likes to write in the first person point of view, which I think makes it a lot easier too. Where you're telling it from one of the characters' points of view. It's the narrator. It's usually, well, in my opinion, it's the easiest. It's my favorite point of view is the first person, because then you can actually pretend like you're actually that character and you're actually living vicariously, you're seeing through the main character's eyes the whole time you're reading. That's what I really love about it. Let's see. And his books tend to be about people who have a lot of money, people who are born in high society. Usually the main character is I don't want to say usually the main character is a guy, because I've only read 2 of his books. I think he was working on his 3rd book, The Last Tycoon, before he died, but I've never actually read that book or gotten my hands on it. I've only read these 2 of his books, The Great Gatsby, and which I never knew this was his first book. I used to think this, because I just assumed this was his first book because we read it in high school. Well, I read it in high school for a class. We were required to read it, The Great Gatsby, for one of our classes, which I loved. This is one of my all-time favorite books, The Great Gatsby. Not just because we had to read in class, because we had to read Catcher in the Rye in class too. But I never really was a big fan of that book, because I feel like the guy was the main character was just all over the place mentally the whole entire book, and I just wanted him to tell me what was going on in that entire book. But with The Great Gatsby, there's so much detail, there's so much. Oh, that's one of my bookmarks. This is actually see what it says. Oh, it says Courage and has a dragon on it. I forgot about this one. Look. Has a dragon on it. It says Courage. Kind of cool. I forgot I had it, actually, for the passionate reader. That's very much me. Anyways. And I made a big connection between these 2 books that I want to share with you, which might be just a theory. I don't know if it's true or not. But I noticed in here in The Great Gatsby, there's mention of a guy named Tom. I mean, not The Great Gatsby. And This Side of Paradise, F. Scott Fitzgerald's first book. And it says it was his first book on the back. There's a part where he's talking, the main character's talking, and he was talking to a guy named Tom. See? Wait, let me see if I can find it. Yes, he's an ethical force. Well, I'm ashamed to say that I'm blank on the subject. How about you, Tom? Tom nodded sheepishly. Well, continued Byrne, you may strike a few poems that are tiresome. And they're talking about some guy, interestingly, they're talking about literature in a literary book, which I found kind of interesting. Kind of cool, too. Kind of like breaking the 3rd or 4th wall, but doing it inside of a book, kind of. And he talks about different people he meets in here. He talks about, I think mental illness is in here too, actually, because the guy's mother in this book, I think has a mental illness, because she there's a point where he says something to her, and then she like goes into like a tangent about something else, and then he just kind of like stares at her, and he just kind of like nods, like okay, mother, kind of thing, just to like, and he's like, but I love the way that he handled it though in this book, because he didn't like, mental illness wasn't, he wasn't like harsh on his mother. He wasn't main character, one of the main, well yeah, the main character, his name's Amory. Amory, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. If it's supposed to be like pronounced with an E even though there's an A, or if it's Amory, like Amory or Emery kind of thing. In the beginning there's a writing, someone did like a whole essay about it, which was kind of like took away from the book, I think, because it's kind of like a spoiler alert, but like inside of a book, so I kind of didn't like that, but at the same time I kind of did, because it got to get me like kind of like prepared to read the book, so I knew what I was gonna have to like diving into. Romantic egoist. I loved how like in the Side of Paradise, there's the books. I forgot there's books inside of the book. Book 1. There's just one book inside of this book, and the book ones, each chapter is titled to the books and the chapters. I forgot about that because I haven't read this in a long time, by the way, and it's kind of a long book, and I didn't have time to read all of it before I could. I'm not that fast of a reader now that I'm older. Anyways, I was just saying, there's a mention of a part in This Side of Paradise where it mentions a guy named Tom. Doesn't say his last name. Okay. But then in F. Scott Fitzgerald's second book, maybe it wasn't his second book that he wrote, but in one of his like later books after this book, there's also mention of a guy named Tom in The Great Gatsby. So at first I thought, is it the same Tom? So is he saying, because like in this book, in his first book, in The Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald, he's talking about like when he went to college, when Emery went to college, and then he was like meeting different people and getting to know different people, and the kind of like networking, you know, stuff like that. Spires and gargoyles. Gargoyles are so cool, aren't they? They're cool statues. Anyways, well, but in this book, Tom's also mentioned, so I wonder if that's just a coincidence, or if he just liked the name Tom, or if it's the same Tom from this book too. But like except if Tom was like 15 years into the future, and Tom is like in his 40s by then, and then he ends up getting married. So then, I don't know. It was just a theory I had, like if it was the same Tom or not. But I mean, if it was like, that was just like the kind of like one of the first thoughts I had after I read these two books, when I first made the connection. But you know, I'm thinking it was probably a different Tom, and I think it's probably just a coincidence, maybe. Because I mean, Jordan's mentioned in here, but I don't remember hearing about Jordan in this book, now that I think about it. There's poems that he recites a poem in this book or something too. And I just love how, like, this book is very, Instead of Paradise is very much, they talk about, like, the perils of growing up. Like, and, like, Amory is very kind of, like romantic, and he's always, like, looking for, like, the best in every situation, which is, like, really good takeaway to take away from the book, too. And how he's so, like, with everything, like, like, every experience, he's just so, like, excited to be around and, like, do things and meet people. And I feel like when you're in your 20s, that's kind of, like, the feeling you get, kind of like when you're in your 20s. That's usually that's how I felt usually, and I could kind of relate to him in that way. Where, you know, it's like you weren't really, like, worrying about the future too much. You weren't really, and he's not really a very, organized type of person in this book, so I could relate to that too. The Great Gatsby, it's also a romantic book. The main character is also not romantic, well, which is really sad because Nick, the main character, was such a nice guy. I kind of wanted him to meet a girl. I mean, meet a woman in the book, obviously. To meet, like, a woman that he was, like, he ends up falling in love with. Because I thought that would have been really, really cool. Like, at the end, if, Nick was, like, ended up unexpectedly falling in love, too. I thought that would have been a really great ending. But I think it would have been, too, like, oh, look, all the loose ends are tied up. And this is just a book. You know, but everyone's happy now. Because in written life, it doesn't end, it usually never ends up that way. Which is really depressing. But anyway... yeah, The Great Gatsby, but also the main, some of the characters in this book are also very, never romantic, but like they're very, sorry, I spilled like a drink or something on this book on the inside, sorry about that, but some of the characters in here are they're very hopeful for the future too, and they don't really worry too much about the future either, and I bought this book at a resale shop, so someone else probably owned this book before me, that's why there's someone else's name in it, so I don't worry I didn't steal it or anything. But yeah, and I love the writing style of this book too, because it's very easy to understand. You know what's going on, there's not too much detail, but there's just enough where you know what's going on, you're not easily confused, like The Catcher in the Rye, where you have to decode every damn thing that the guy's thinking, and then you're left wondering if you're even right or not. Or was the Catcher in the Rye, was that even just like a book about some guy's opinion about his life? You know, was that all it was? Because it was a pain to read for me. And that dragon on the cover really threw me off, because the whole time I'm like waiting to see a dragon in the book, or to like symbolic probably. But it was just so, like, and then at the end, I'm like, it was just, I don't know, it's disappointing. For me, I didn't like, I'm sure other people like that book, but for me, I just didn't, it's not a book that I would recommend to anyone. But I would recommend these two, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and The Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Because he does really good. There's more character development, I feel like, in this first book than there is in The Great Gatsby. I feel like he really kind of like toned it down in this one. Like he really did. See, this one's even longer than this one. This was his first book. See how long this one was? And then Great Gatsby was like that long. So if you compare the two, this one's like not almost half, but it's like not even the same length as that one. They're like some shorter, see? I don't know if you can tell, maybe if I put them like this. So they're like this. See? The Great Gatsby is on the right, and the Side of Paradise is on the left. And it's a big Side of Paradise. Because it's, oh my gosh, all the detail in this book. Oh my gosh, so many details in this book. I had to stop a few times when I first read this book. I've actually read it, I think, twice, and I had to stop, I think, the first time, because there was just so much going on, and Emery was going like to like these places and figuring out himself, and I feel like when you're in your 20s you kind of are like that too. So yeah, so overall that's why I really like these two books too, because the author is very good at painting a mental image about I feel like he was a really talented writer. And he wrote other books too, which I haven't read. Which it would have been a shame. It would have been cool to read some of his other books, but I guess if you're wondering what some of his other books were, some of his other books, Babylon Revisited and Other Stories, which I think that's interesting. Then there's Six Tales of the Jazz Age and Other Stories. The stories of F. Scott Fitzgerald. So I didn't know this, but I guess maybe he wrote like short stories too, which I never knew. Tender is the Night. The Beautiful and Damned. I've heard of that, and I think it was made into a movie, but I don't know if that was based on that book, or if it just happened to be a movie that happened to have the same title as one of his books. The Pat Hobby Stories and The Last Tycoon. Yeah, and The Last Tycoon, that was his last book. That was his last book. The Last Tycoon. I think that was his last book then. Because I remember reading about it online, how it was his last book or something. So yeah, and that's why I also like these two books.